guys.
Hello.
Welcome to this week's episode and also the first episode of our new season of the 13th Floor Podcast. I'm Cece.
I'm Alex.
I'm James.
Man, does it feel good to be back.
Yeah, I like throwing James off right at the beginning.
Yeah, we did. We threw you off.
I noticed. His voice.
Yeah.
And now he won't be able to sleep tonight because he'll be like clicking on a light switch 4 times and all that stuff before bed now.
He'll just take a Benadryl before bed
right.
and that'll be that. James, how have you been?
I've been good. This weather, man, it gets cold and then it gets warm and then my allergies mess up. But other than that, I've been good.
Is that so? That's still happening in Kentucky?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's like it'll be 70 and then it'll be 60 and then it'll be 85 and then it'll be 40 and it just keeps changing.
Rude. Here in Atlanta, it's been nice. We've been busy with just like our 9-to-5 work and then the kids. Everybody's doing stuff. But we went to Florida recently and that was really nice.
Yeah.
Best.
It's nice to get on the beach.
Yeah, it's like you forget how revitalizing being near an ocean is.
Yeah.
Unless you live near the ocean all the time. I'm curious, any of our listeners that are near the ocean, for you guys, is the ocean boring?
Beach. It has to be a beach. Ocean, boring. Beach, great.
What?
Do you just want to live by the ocean with no beach?
Well, why would you live near the ocean without a beach? There's going to be a beach where the water meets the shore.
Not always.
Are you just thinking of sand?
No.
You just want
the only
sand?
exception is if you're like at some cliff or something.
There you go. There's that. You can have like the rocky areas.
I would be afraid to live near a cliff.
The cliffs of Dover.
Yeah.
Listen, I have terrible anxiety if I'm near a cliff, or the thought of my children being near a cliff.
If you live on the ice, would you call the place where the ocean meets the ice, would you call that a beach?
It's an icy beach.
Oh, yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, Alex, listen. We don't have to argue about this.
Right.
That is
the
not
listeners
why
agree with me.
Our listeners are here to listen to you and your absurd opinion on a beach. We'll have to ask on the 13th Floor Instagram, at 13th Floor Podcast, what the people think, okay? Can you have an ocean without a beach? That's we're off to a great start, guys. James, normally we have an icebreaker. What is our icebreaker today?
This is probably going to be a tough one, in the sense that nobody's going to have an answer that they want except for me. But we are talking about weird war inventions. And so I was thinking, if you had to live through a past war, which war would you like to live through?
This sounds like a question I would have made up.
It does actually sound like an Alex question. Just my thing. I don't know. Like, I'm not a war expert.
Oh, I didn't know you had to be a war expert.
And all of the wars that I know most about seem super bloody. So how about you guys go first, and then I'll just copy one of your answers.
The Cold War, because nothing happened.
Oh, that's a good answer. That's the Cold War, James. What about you?
The Peloponnesian War.
Why the Peloponnesian War?
Because it's fun to say.
It was just so dramatic, you know? I mean, I feel so bad for Carthage. They were just destroyed, just utterly destroyed. But the actual warfare itself, you know, elephants on mountaintops and hoplite formations, just really cool.
I read a lot about elephants in war and how they were like they were the ancient tanks.
Yeah.
You see it coming up the...
A lot of tank stories for this evening.
Yeah, you see it coming up the hill and you're just like, oh, shoot. They got the elephants.
Yeah.
Were there any other animals that were used in warfare, James, that I'm just not aware of?
I mean, well, there's going to be some this evening, but horses were a pretty common thing. In fact, more common than anything. In fact, I would even argue that that's what changed war forever, was when people went from foot soldiers to cavalry and then from cavalry to chariots. I mean, that just changed the game.
That sounds like it's coming from somebody who's lived through a few wars, like a vampire named James, remember?
Let's just say the Peloponnesian War was exciting.
All right. Well, James told you what we're talking about. Interesting war inventions for our very first episode back this new season. And James has already stipulated that he's going last. So, how about I go first?
Are you sure?
Yeah, I feel like you're excited about what you're talking about, Alex, as far as I can tell.
So I guess you think yours is boring then?
No, I don't think it's boring. I think it's interesting, but I feel like you guys are going to have more pizzazz
Yeah, mine's going to be
with the
better.
war stuff
Yeah.
than I am.
Mine are always better.
Oh my gosh. Sometimes. All right, let me pull up my notes. Okay, all right. Chiplets.
I'm interested to hear what you're talking about.
By the way, while you're
tell
doing
me.
that, I just want everybody to know that I gave Pumpkin a ping pong ball because I heard they like to play with them, and she's playing with it right now.
How does a tarantula play with a ping pong ball? Does it push
She like
it around?
rolls it around all over the place.
Wow, getting that brain activity in there.
Yeah.
So smart. Pumpkin. Professional ping pong.
Listen, out of all of your tarantulas, or critters is what I should say, James, Pumpkin's by far my favorite.
She's
gonna
got
put
the
that out
most
there.
personality.
That's why I like her. I think that we connected when I was helping record that video of all of your spiders, James. I looked Pumpkin in the eyes, and I just thought, she's got it. All right, listen.
She's got the it factor.
Listen, enough about Pumpkin. We're not here to talk about Pumpkin. We're here to listen about interesting war inventions, and I have decided to come at this from the medical advancement angle, okay?
Oh, the nerd angle is
Listen, it is a little bit nerdy, but I think it's really interesting because when you think about it, there's a lot of injury in war. There's a lot of bad things that happen in war, right?
Really?
Yeah, it's not good. And but through that, there have been some medical advancements that have happened. Alex, put that down. Our children got a little drawing mat from the Easter Bunny, and Alex is sitting over here drawing. Here, let me take a picture for the 13th floor Instagram, okay? Just so that you guys can see. Uh-oh, I think I unplugged Alex. 1 second.
Oh. Everybody can hear me, but I can't hear them.
Okay, here. Here, Alex. Get it so that's in front of the... Alright. We'll post that on the 13th floor Instagram so you can see what Alex has been doing. Well, James and I have been talking to one another. Alex is off here being rude.
I think this is content.
Listen, do you
This
want
is
me
content.
to tell you about interesting war inventions?
I'm gonna be honest. People are just scrambling to their Instagram right now.
That's true. You guys check out the Instagram. Follow us. I'm going to be more diligent about posting, so follow us at 13th Floor Podcast, 13th Floor Podcast. Okay. So I think I'm going to take things from the medical perspective.
Okay.
And first I'm going to cover something that is used every day. In fact, Gwen came home today and was like, "Daddy, get the super glue." I'm talking about super glue first.
Oh wow.
Yes, super glue. And people get things stuck to their bodies all the time with this. In today's instance, Gwen wanted you to glue the head back onto a toy that she twisted the head off.
Well, it's dumb.
It was an accident, and she didn't mean to do it, but she did it. And yes, it was not the smartest thing in the world. But this was somewhat invented, or at least the beginnings of super glue was started during World War II. Yes.
Using leftover horse parts, I'm sure.
Per lemelson.mit/.edu. I can't remember. This guy named Harry, I think it was Coover.
Harry Cooper?
I wrote no, it's not. I wrote
Clover.
several different names
Oh,
here.
they're all next to each other, all different.
Yeah.
Autocorrect
If you-
has taken me
If
out.
you
here.
search Harry Cougar, be sure to turn Safe Search off. I mean on.
Harry Coover invented it by accident in 1942, and he and a team of Alex, get your hat out of the gutter. He and a team of other scientists were doing research with chemicals called cyanoacrylates.
Oh yeah.
And James knows all about them. Their goal was to create a plastic that could be used for precision gun sights. But they're using this stuff, and it's just getting sticky and gross and messy, and they're making, all these problems are coming from this, and the testing is not going well. Everything's getting stuck together, and
It's
like,
not
well,
surprising that things with Harry Cougar got messy.
Alex, it didn't work. Okay, they were very upset by this stuff during World War II. They're like, it's never going to work. So Coover put it in the closet, And he sat on it until 6 years later.
Wow, that's a long time to sit on something.
Yeah, he just sat on it. He's glued. He got glued.
Yeah, glued.
No, he started working for Kodak. And he was working with a group of chemists there, and they were testing heat-resistant polymers for jet airplane canopies. Pff, the most random thing in the world. Can you imagine that being your job? It's like, honey, I make jet canopies.
It's kind of cool.
It's
Yeah.
cool, but also very random.
Yeah, it is.
And I guess I can't speak. My job is very random, too. But this time, listen, Coover, he looked at his little invention, this substance, and he was like, you know what, this is kind of cool. It doesn't need heat, it doesn't need pressure, and it makes things stick together, like, permanently. So at this point, he filed a patent for, quote, alcohol catalyzed cyanoacrylate adhesive compositions / superglue. And when they put it on the market, it was originally called Eastman 910.
Oof, that's
Yeah.
a horrible name.
I know, it didn't have the same kind of ring, but they eventually renamed it to superglue, which I feel is a perfect name for it. And they brought it back to life during the Vietnam War. So it circles back. It circles back to war. It started at war, and then it kind of, things got calm, and then it came back. So during during the Vietnam War, they had field surgeons who started using it to close wounds. And they'd glue the wounds together, and it would stop the bleeding immediately, which allowed hurt soldiers to then be transported to medical facilities for further assistance. So, and this, listen, I'm telling you guys this. I'm telling you guys this right now. I feel like a disclaimer is needed here.
Oh, okay.
So just because people take superglue, the medical field, the FDA has approved this in some cases, you can use it. Let the medical professionals do it. If you cut yourself at home, do not go and grab the superglue, okay? The 13th floor is not liable if you superglue a cut on your finger and it gets infected, okay? So let this be the formal disclaimer.
But if it saves your life, we'll take the credit.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. Just go straight to the hospital, okay?
It's funny. Glue. The Peloponnesian War. You know what they used for sword wounds?
What?
Honey.
Honey?
Yeah, you get a sword wound, you could get infected, but honey is hygroscopic, and
Yeah,
so it kills.
Antimicrobial.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a long conversation with our local honey guy last week at the farmer's market. And he was telling me about that stuff. But he didn't say anything about the Peloponnesian War.
He wasn't there.
No, I guess he wasn't. And then next I'm going to talk about plastic surgery.
Oh.
Yes. And this has been around since before the World Wars, but around World War II there were major advancements because obviously very, very bloody and dangerous war for a lot of people. A lot of people got really, really hurt. There were lots of chemical burns, disfigurements. It was a really bad time for people. So during these wars, people would get really hurt. And then there's this guy named Sir Harold Gillies, and he is known as one of the pioneers of plastic surgery.
Harry Cougar and Harry Gillies?
Harold Gillies. Alex, oh my gosh. Listen, he revolutionized many of the treatments that are still used to this day, and he used them to piece these poor soldiers back together again. And surgeons and doctors during World War II just continued to build upon all of his advancements that he had started to kind of roll out when it comes to this stuff. Many of the techniques, again, that are still in use today, like rhinoplasty, skin grafting, reconstructive facial surgery. There's all sorts of things that they really worked on. And this is something that I hadn't heard about before, but there's this club. It was called the Guinea Pig Club. James, I imagine you've probably heard of it. Have you heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Guinea Pig Club was founded in 1941, and it was a group of airmen who were severely injured during the war, and many of them underwent experimental, for the time, reconstructive surgeries, hence the name Guinea Pig Club. But this group of men, they really became close friends because they could all relate to one another, and the goal was, one, to help put these men back together again, but it also helped them heal psychologically and reintegrate into society. I can't remember the specific town where this happened, but the town was encouraged, like, don't look away from these men if you see them walking down the street. It's going to help them build back their confidence. And it really did. These people were friends, for years. the doctor that led this club, it was another pioneer of the plastic surgery industry. His name was Archibald McIndow. He said of the group, quote, "You must have courage, you must have humor, and you must never give up." So it was kind of like this uplifting club, even though the reason this club existed was very dark.
Yeah.
Like the Dead Poets Society.
It's, I've never seen that movie.
Oh, it's
You know,
great.
in World War One, it was some of the most haunting images of World War One is when people would get shot in the face, and
Yeah.
really the only treatment was just sort of like these waxy partial face masks that kind of made them look almost partly doll-like. Just
Yeah.
a terrible, terrible way to cover up those injuries, but they didn't have anything better at the time.
Yeah, until Harold Gillies and Archibald McIndow came onto the scene. And there were a lot of other doctors who helped grow out this field. It wasn't just those two, but they kind of get a lot of the credit. But yeah, it was interesting. I thought it was really interesting. It's something that I didn't personally know, that's kind of where plastic surgery started to become a thing. And now look where it's at.
Yeah, now I get a nose job
Oh
and look
my
like everybody
gosh.
else.
Oh my gosh, fillers and all that stuff. It's a
Yeah.
little bit different nowadays.
I get 16 Botox injections.
I'm amazed by the number of units. You want to know how many units you get?
Yeah, how many units? Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you get, the older you look somehow.
Listen, I'm not going to talk about Botox, even though I could talk about it for a very long time. I don't personally use it,
You're a
but
professional Botox expert.
no, I just have opinions. But I'm going to talk about the last thing that is on my list, and that is something that is near and dear to Alex's heart:
Getting the hat trick.
the EpiPen.
Oh.
Yeah, Alex has got one. James, do you have
Never
one?
used one.
I do.
Yeah, everybody's got one nowadays. And you guys have War to thank for those things existing.
Thanks, War.
No, don't. Alex has never used his, but the medical device, if you don't know what an EpiPen is, it's used to administer epinephrine if you go into anaphylactic shock, have an allergy. Alex used to get allergy shots, so they made him have one, but the mechanism that shoots the medicine into your body was created during World War II. Yes, and it kind of makes sense. The military was trying to find ways to give antidotes to soldiers who were exposed to things like nerve gas and mustard gas. And so they loaded these little mechanisms with atropine to counter the poison. But the EpiPens back then, they weren't called EpiPens. They were, I don't know what they were called, but they were bulky and crude. So soldiers didn't really carry them themselves. It was something that the medics would have, but they were really kind of cumbersome to use. So during the war, they were just kind of like in prototype. They were in their prototype era, as Taylor Swift would say. But they were refined over time. And then in the 1970s, a guy named Sheldon Kaplan designed the, quote, combo pen, which really was what became the first tech to lead to the EpiPen. So his invention was what led to the FDA going like, this is cool. It might come in handy for the general public. And then they gave it their stamp of approval. And now anybody and everybody can own an EpiPen if you want one. And they're way too expensive as it is, but we don't have to go into that controversy. But they're here now, and it all started during
They're
World
here
War II.
now. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're here now.
So that is my spiel on interesting war inventions.
I got
Alex?
one addendum to that.
Yeah? What?
Just because I think it's funny. You were talking about antidotes, and in World War One, Canadian soldiers would actually pee on some of their spare clothes and put it over their faces in order to neutralize chlorine gas, because that was a terrible way to die. Now, here's the funny part. The reason why they would do that is they thought that the ammonia in urine would actually neutralize the chlorine. But it wasn't. It was the water in the urine, which means they could have just soaked the clothes with something a lot cleaner and would have had the same results.
Maybe they didn't always have access to water, James.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
That's
Maybe.
fair.
That's it.
Listen. Alex.
Yep. I'm ready.
What are you talking about today?
Talk about tanks.
Elephants?
Oh, yeah. No, not those. Guess again.
Tanks.
Guess. What's it made out of?
Metal.
No. I'm talking about inflatable tanks.
Inflatable tanks.
Yeah.
How can a tank, when I think of a tank, I think of something big and heavy.
Yeah.
How can it be inflatable?
Well, it's a good thing you asked, Cecilia. You see, back in 1941, during the North African campaign, the British created inflatable tanks. Why did they create inflatable tanks? Ask me.
Why did they create inflatable tanks?
So they could trick their enemies, CC. Isn't it obvious? Oh my goodness.
So this was like made of plastic and it would just float.
Yeah, it was fabric. It was fabric. They're foldable
They
tanks.
pop up tanks.
Pop-up tanks. They'd inflate them. They'd use air. They'd use whatever they could to, some people would make them out of wood, but a lot of them were inflatable tanks. They would just blow them up, make them out of fabric. That way, if they got done with them, they could fold them up. Because at the time, it would take them, they could only make two inflatable tanks a day. So it's like it's a big process. It's a big process.
So what did they use them for? I know you said to trick the...
Yeah,
the
that's
other
all
team.
it was. It was just war games. It was to mess with the other side, to think that you had overwhelming forces, when in fact, if they could get closer, they would know that you just had cloth.
Yep.
And so you could really mess with the enemy's mind.
All it would take is the wind to take one of those things away, and then it's like...
Well,
what's
you got to
going on
remember
here?
what was happening was you have these aerial scouts, and they would get photos, and they would give it back as reconnaissance. And so, like, the Germans would be flying over the British countryside, and they come back home, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, they've got a big army out there," and it wouldn't be. It would just be fake.
Yes, exactly. So from a distance, it was really hard to tell that these things weren't real. So you could easily... So, for instance, Operation Fortitude. This is part of the D-Day campaign. But, so what the U.S. did was, on one side, one front of the battle in southeast England, they had all of these inflatable tanks. And so it made it look like they had a huge army coming on this side of things. And a lot of credit is given to this operation because this deception led Hitler... He put a lot more forces on one side instead of...
The side that they should have been on?
Yeah, right. Instead of storming the beaches of Normandy.
Wow.
He couldn't get the reinforcements back over there in time because they were all distracted by these inflatable tanks. That were just, they're using sound effects to make it sound like they're shooting. Like, they're doing everything they can to make these things appear real.
That's smart.
And of course, they're layered in with real tanks, too. So... they're firing shells, and no one's paying attention to what's firing what at the time. And so Hitler got duped, and so we were able to storm Normandy, partly because Operation Fortitude was a success with the inflatable tanks.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have never heard that before in my life.
Yeah, I hadn't either, and I thought it was so cool. and they were so useful that they were used for a long time. Ask me how long, Cece.
How long were they used for?
They're still used.
They're still used?
That's right.
When was the last time they were used?
They're currently used in the war between Russia and Ukraine.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yep. They're being used. Inflatable tanks, wooden tanks, all kinds of them are being used to be distracted. Now, they've had to level up their game, though.
Yeah, I'd say they probably have to be a little bit more...
Not only do they have to be a little more, more believable visually, but now you have things like heat vision.
Yeah.
So now you can see if there's anything inside. But there's solutions for that. You can put a space heater inside, and it'll look like it has a heat signature.
Yeah.
So you can do all kinds of things. You can make sound effects. There's all kinds of things you can do to mask it now. And there's been apparently a lot of credit to both sides wasting each other's resources on, like, dropping missiles on a piece of cloth, effectively. And so, yeah, they're still part of wars currently, and they probably will be Forever. As long as you can waste an enemy's resources, it doesn't. I wouldn't imagine it costs too much to make these now.
Yeah,
but it's
that's always been part
cool.
of war. Like Zhuge Liang back in the Three Kingdoms period, he bluffed using basically sound effects to create this illusion that he had these really big forces behind him. He only had I actually can't remember how many he had, but the opposing army had 150,000 soldiers, way more, and he got them to retreat because they thought they had a much bigger army just because they could hear the marching, and they're like, oh no, this isn't gonna fly.
Yeah, it's so cool. Like so they're really successful because they can just mess with even spies or reconnaissance can be tricked by looking at these things, and they'll look at now they can mimic radar signatures, like I said, the heat emissions, and they'll even put metal plates on the outside of it to make it appear more real, but also radiate the heat off of the plates. And so they also are getting more elaborate with making tracks, covering up tracks for real tanks, and doing things like that to make it even more difficult
to guess
notice.
What the other,
like even the top,
doing.
even the turret will move now. So now they can get the turret to move to appear real too.
Ow.
So pretty cool. But yeah, there's a company in the Czech Republic called Inflatech, which is a great name that makes these, and it's pretty cool. You know, it's something they say it only costs about $1,000 to make, and then you can set one up within 10 minutes, and then you can just waste your enemy's resources taking it out.
Wow.
So pretty cool.
That's pretty smart. Something as somebody who is very non-confrontational, I would never in a million years have thought to do something like that.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that it was still currently used. like I knew it was used in relatively modern warfare because I had read about the heat signatures and things like that. But then when I looked into it more and I found out it's actively being used today, I was like, oh, that's interesting.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
That was my topic.
Very good, Alex. Very good. James. Hi, May. What are you talking about?
I got some weird ones. That being said, before I get to them, I do want to mention another weird tank. Just because it's such an insane idea, and it didn't last long as far as use, but there was a tank created by the Germans called the Kugelpanzer, which means ball tank. And it was like, it's literally like a roly-poly for a soldier. Like, it was this little round ball that you put one person in, and it's armed with like one machine gun, because, you know, again, it's only got one person in it, and it would use these two rotating hemispheres on either side of the ball to literally roll down the battlefield. And it just had like a little two-stroke engine, like basically a dirt bike engine to operate. And it was used pretty briefly, mainly just because the Soviets caught them and we were starting to reverse engineer it, so they were like, let's scrap that. But I just think it's cool that there was like a one-man little ball tank that existed. It looks like
a little alien.
It looks so
ball.
Useless.
Yes, it certainly does. But yeah, for my weird war stuff, I thought I would talk about the use of animals in war. And there's one notable one that I really want to talk about. But let's start with the smaller one. So, first of all, even now, the U.S. military is attempting, and has for decades attempted, to train dolphins and seals to disarm floating mines in the ocean. Like, that's a thing. And if you're wondering, well, what about like animal rights stuff? Yeah, people are mad about it. It's not a popular thing to do. But it also, it prevents a lot of human casualties, according to the people who are funding it. So I just think that's kind of interesting. But the two that I think are way more bizarre when it comes to warfare and animals is one being Project Pigeon. Project Pigeon was a scrapped and then revived a few years later project in the 40s, World War II, to basically get pigeons to control bombs, to guide bombs.
So, for a second, I thought you were going to take this into like the carrier pigeon area, but this is different.
Nope. Carrier pigeons are kind of weird, but like there's kind of a rationale to that. Whereas what they would do, I'm not kidding, they would take a group of pigeons and they would teach them to recognize a target in front of a screen, and then when they saw the target, they would peck it. They would peck the screen. And gradually, they would peck harder and harder and more rapidly, and in exchange, they would get food. And one pigeon actually pecked 10,000 times in 45 minutes. Like, I imagine he had a sore beak after that. But the logic was that they could, put bombs in different areas and have the pigeons be the catalyst to set them off.
Those poor pigeons.
Yeah. And also, what's clever about this, it is weird, but what's clever about it is using sensors to detect the movement and send signals. They could also get the pigeons to steer the bomb in the direction that the screen moves. So it was kind of like the precursor to modern day drone operators, whereas instead of a human with a remote control operating a drone, you had a pigeon pecking at a screen for a guided bomb.
That's so weird.
That blows
Absolutely
my mind.
Nuts. There were also anti-tank dogs. That was a very real thing, which, it makes me a little sadder. But what happened is they would. It's not what it sounds like. It sounds like we're talking about dogs being sent into minefields and blowing up. No. What they would do is you'd have these tanks, and, dogs are much faster than humans. So what they train these dogs to do is to run out to the tanks in the path of them, leave a timer-detonated bomb, and then retreat. So that was the logic. So it wasn't planned on doing that. The problem was that then they thought, well, we've got an even better method, and that is impact detonation. The thing is, the impact detonation does kill the dog because it's impact detonation. So, yeah, that's the downside. No, I will say, and this is me being a little prejudiced, this was done mostly by Russia. So this was like a USSR move. This wasn't something that we did.
It sounds like USSR.
It does, doesn't it?
Well, aren't they
did a lot of messed up stuff to dogs.
They carried out that experiment with the zombie dog, right?
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. Don't like it.
Yep.
Don't like it one bit.
So, yeah, pretty weird stuff. But this is my absolute favorite two things I'm going to mention. One's animal related and one's not. It's completely insane, and it is cruel, and it would never fly today, mostly because they're endangered. This does kill the animals, but bat bombs.
Bat bombs.
So,
really?
This was the U.S. The Marine Corps decided, hey, you know how the enemy has kamikaze pilots? What if we had a bunch of little kamikaze pilots? So what they would do is they would take a bunch of bats, and each bat they would give a small incendiary device, and then they would drop this big capsule containing these bats, and then as they would fly to roost in different structures, the device would blow up and set the structures on fire. So it actually reminds me, I wish I could remember who did this, but there was I want to say he was a Viking back in the day, but I could be wrong. Maybe he was a Germanic warlord, but there was a fellow who took a city with no human troops utilized. What he did was he actually observed that birds were going in and out of this city, and they would roost on the roofs of this city. And, this was back in, medieval period, so not a lot of fire suppressant stuff back then, and everything was flammable, everything was wood. So what he did was he actually took little strips of fabric and tied it to a bunch of pigeons or birds and lit them. And then when they would fly to the town, they just burned the town down.
Wow.
So, just another weird example. That's not so much modern, but it kind of reminds me of that, was these bat bombs. The whole point of them was to turn a whole bunch of bats into bombs. It sounds like something out of like one of those cheesy Adam West Batman episodes, bat bomb. But it was real. Like, it was a very real thing. Wow. So, yeah. Now, this is one of my favorite things, though. I'm going to be talking very briefly about the use of smell in warfare. So there's a few. And they've come up with a bunch of different versions. Halitosis, flatulence, heavy sweating. Basically chemicals that emulate those aromas. And they would drop them This was the plan. It never really came to fruition. In fact, it won an Ig Nobel Prize. One of them, I'll tell you which one last because it's the funniest one in my opinion. But the logic there was, and this is not an exaggeration, to make the enemy so smelly they couldn't hide from you because you could smell them. That's a real war invention that was come up with. I mean, and even now, like, we do have, tear gas and just really strong aromatic, non-lethal weapons nowadays for like mob management, crowd control, and a lot of that came from that. But this was never used. What I'm about to say, this was an actual plan dating all the way back to 1994. When I first heard about this years ago, I thought it was like World War I, World War II, because this just does not seem like something they would come up with in 1994.
Yeah.
And that is the gay bomb. So,
I've heard about
yeah,
this.
the Air Force in the 90s thought, what if we disperse sex pheromones on the battlefield, and it makes the enemy soldiers uncontrollably attracted to each other, and then they can't really be fighting us because they're doing other things with each other.
Oh my gosh.
And on top of that, the idea of it affecting the machismo of the soldiers too. So they got pretty far with this. They were basically testing them on like rhesus monkeys and using a whole bunch of compounds that they thought would work. And of course, it ultimately didn't work. And on top of that, just the PR was enough of a reason where people were like, this is not going to work. And they never actually published this. It ended up being leaked, and it was just it was a bad PR piece for them, and it in fact did win an Ig Nobel Peace Prize for literally trying to make a gay bomb.
It's so absurd that you don't think something like that is actually real.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Absolutely. Completely insane. But yeah, that's my weird war stuff.
That's some weird war stuff.
It is.
There's a lot out there that I personally did not realize were just like normal everyday inventions that had their beginnings during war. So
Oh yeah, my favorite's M&M's.
M&Ms? I don't know M&Ms.
Yeah.
Tell me M&Ms.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so in the Pacific Theater in World War II, morale was a problem. You got these guys fighting, and they're away from home, and they wanted to make them feel better. And this was also around the time that they stopped rationing like booze for soldier morale. And so they thought, if they could just have a taste of home, but they can't because it's the Pacific, and if they had chocolate, it would melt, and it'd be so comforting to have chocolate. So they basically instigated like this government bid thing where they're like, whoever can make chocolate melt in your mouth and not in your hands. They didn't actually say it like that. We're going to give you a big grant, and you can keep our boys happy because they'll have chocolate in the field. And M&M's was born as a result. So literally, that's where M&M's comes from. They thought, well, if we spray candy coating on this, it won't melt, and they literally would give it in the rations to soldiers.
And now they got a big old giant storefront in New York City.
That is true.
Wow. Well, this has been a very interesting first episode back. And listener, thank you so much for tuning in and staying around. I know that we took another hiatus, but I can personally say that I'm excited to be back.
Yeah,
and I think that
same.
you and James are too.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
Yes. Well, next week we're going to be talking about parts or out of place artifacts. So stay tuned for that episode. And if you want more 13th Floor content, follow us on our Instagram at 13th Floor Podcast. James, how do you want to sign us off today?
Alex, who does our music?
Our music is by Grant Cook. You can find his music on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music, anywhere you listen to music.
And he just recently released some new things too, so go and look for those.
Yeah,
Excellent.
it's very good.
Now, James, we got to have a parting thought. You always say something at the end that is just, groundbreaking.
That's true. If you do invade anybody, like including Carthage, salt the ground so nothing can ever grow.
There you go. Until next week, we hope that you can keep it strange. Wow, James, that was something.